Hello, my name is Benjamin Hart. I'm an American attorney and the Managing Director of Integrity Legal here in Bangkok, Thailand. In this video today, as the title suggests, we're going to be discussing the Form I-864A. For those who are interested in this topic generally, I strongly recommend first checking out the video on the I-864. That's a form for, it's an affidavit of support to support a spouse coming to the United States. We're going to be talking about this specifically in the context of spouses of American citizens, although spouses of lawful permanent residents, etc., can also utilize this form. But that being said, I'm going to do it from the context of a USC just to sort of speed things along, I guess. The I-864A is essentially for a joint sponsor. Well, let me be more clear. You may actually have a single joint sponsor utilizing an I-864, but the I-864A is sort of an addendum for a household member of that joint sponsor, or of the sponsor for that matter, depending on circumstances. So, with respect to the I-864A, what are we talking about? Well, my rule of thumb, just kind of generally, and there's much more nuance with respect to the I-864A. I'm just going to kind of shoot from the hip when it comes to this issue and just deal with this, you know, again in the American citizen context with a foreign spouse, and sort of deal with it in one particular narrowly defined context. I like, my major rule of thumb with respect to the I-864A is if you have a joint sponsor who actually is married and files their tax returns jointly with that spouse. Under those circumstances, it's probably a pretty good bet the I-864A is going to be necessary on top of the I-864 affidavit of support for that spouse who files their taxes with the joint sponsor. So basically, it's very similar to the I-864 insofar as it does create certain obligations, certain recognition of obligations created by the I-864 joint sponsor, the original affiant, if you will. But the thing to take away from this video is in those instances where you've got a spouse of a joint sponsor, you're utilizing a joint sponsor on top of the American petitioner, or the petitioner generally, lawful permanent resident petitioner, whatever, you're gonna need to utilize an I-864A with respect to the spouse of the joint sponsor, especially under the circumstances where they're filing joint tax returns with their American citizen or with their spouse who happens to be acting as a joint sponsor. The I-864A can get rather complicated, especially in larger family-based immigration scenarios. I'm not going to get too deep into that. That being said, there are certain ways that other household members can utilize assets and income in order to sort of, in the aggregate, be able to overcome the specific threshold with respect to being able to provide adequate financial support in order to support a visa applicant immigrating to the United States. So it's a rather complex form. It's kind of nuanced insofar as it has rather more uses than even those I'm mentioning here. But this video is just simply designed to provide a brief overview specifically from an American citizen perspective marrying a foreign spouse, and specifically from the context of those who need a joint sponsor and whether or not those joint sponsors then have a spouse of their own who may or may not need to go ahead and fill out the I-864A.